Welcome to the Pacific Coast Model Works YouTube channel. Several weeks ago, I had the opportunity while in Cheyenne, Wyoming, to visit the Cheyenne Depot Museum. And within that museum is a famous narrow gauge railroad, HO scale 3-foot gauge, called the Union, Central, and Northern. Sadly, the day after I visited, the creator of the layout, Harry W. Brunk, passed away at the age of 82. Now, Harry was an influencer in the model railroad world before the word influencer was popular. Beginning in 1980, he published hundreds of articles in the Narrow Gauge and Short Line Gazette about the building of his model railroad. And these articles weren't necessarily how-to articles. They were philosophical. They were different than what other people were writing at the time. Now, to understand Harry, you have to understand that he was a commercial artist. He painted Western-themed paintings and was frequently featured on the cover of the Western Horseman magazine. His artistic talent definitely bled into model railroading. He spent hours and hours, both in the field and with reference materials, creating sketches of things that appeared along the Colorado and Southern Clear Creek Division. And from those sketches came drawings, and from those drawings came scratch-built models, replicas of many of the structures, locomotives, rolling stock, and equipment that was seen along that line. Very little of what you see today was available commercially when Harry built the layout. Almost everything is entirely scratch built. As we go through the tour, I'm going to be quoting from Harry's articles so you can get a little bit of the flavor of who this man was. I think in this case, the man is every bit as important as the railroad itself. And while the railroad is beautiful, while the railroad is impressive, I think the man was even more impressive. If you're ever in Cheyenne, Wyoming, you owe it to yourself to make a visit to the Cheyenne Depot Museum. They have an incredible collection of artifacts from Cheyenne and Union Pacific history. The museum occupies a portion of the Union Pacific Cheyenne Depot. The depot was completed in 1897 and is a well-preserved railroad architecture survivor. A stone's throw from the museum is the Union Pacific Steam Shop, where the restored Union Pacific steam engines, including Big Boy number 4014, are housed and maintained. You can get a good view of the shop from the observation deck on the second level of the museum. The steam shop is a surviving portion of the great roundhouse that once dominated the Cheyenne yards. To the left of the yard observation deck is the entrance to the former second floor baggage storage area, where the Union Central and Northern layout is on display. This layout was built by Mr. Brunk over a period of 30 years in Stanton, Nebraska. In his final configuration, it was housed in a single wide trailer that he referred to as Little Colorado. In 2011, the trailer house was trucked from outside Omaha to Cheyenne, where the layout was painstakingly disassembled, lifted to the second floor of the depot, and reassembled by a team of volunteers under the oversight of Mr. Brunk. The layout is now open to the public and operated by volunteers from the Northern Colorado Model Railroad Club. My guides Rick and Paul were helpful and enthusiastic during my visit. As you enter the room, low and to the right is Golden, Colorado. This portion was added to the layout after the move to the museum. It was originally represented by a staging area on Mr. Brunk's layout. For the balance of the tour, we will reference the original layout track plan as it appeared in Little, Colorado, so you can get an idea of the space relationships. Continuing into the room, again to the right, you see the town of Black Hawk high above Golden. The modeling is spectacular, from the use of forced perspective to the blending of scenery with backdrops. There are hundreds of tiny details to be observed. Keep in mind that many of the structures featured existed in Black Hawk and have been faithfully reproduced as scratch-built models. The Black Hawk Boiler Works and its companion, the machine shop, represented one of 4 regrets I have now that Black Hawk is nearly complete. To conserve space, both of these structures were reduced in length and width. Only lack of additional space kept me from starting again. It'll have to do. From Black Hawk, the railroad curves through Smith Hill to the Elk Creek Tank area. Those interesting cast iron legs on the prototype tank inspired me to build the Elk Creek Tank and create a scene for it on my old UC&N. That scene is haphazard at best, merely a setting for the tank, but at least the tank was accurate. The tracks curve again and make their way through Forks Creek. This was the first area of the line that Mr. Brunk modeled. Forks Creek never hosted a town, it was merely a railroad junction with a station and a section house. The Forks Creek Eating House kitchen chimney was fashioned with soldered brass tubing. This was an interesting exercise in patience that exhausted my stock of socially unacceptable words, which are reserved for those occasions when things slip at the most critical point in the construction work. From Forks Creek, the line continues through the Floyd Hill area, crossing and recrossing Clear Creek as it winds its way toward the Argo Mill and Tunnel. Modeling the Argo Tunnel chutes in their entirety was a must. This is where I made a master of a section of cribbing and cast segments in plaster. Otherwise, I might still be doing board-by-board cribbing. Visitors to the Argo Tunnel area of the UC&N never have a clue that all the timber crib mast is 3 plaster castings. Just beyond the Argo Tunnel chutes, the line pulls into Idaho Springs. Regarding the 4 buildings that form the corner of 17th and Idaho Streets, the UC&N's version's fronts cannot be seen, so I have not noted measurements or details for the fronts. I apologize to those of you who want to model the whole buildings, but my main interest is in the backsides of the buildings facing the tracks. Again, the town is modeled as faithfully as Mr. Brunk could manage with the reference materials available. He sometimes reworked parts of the railroad as research revealed new details about an area. Around another curve is Georgetown. I headed doggedly back to the curve of the roadbed and scenery to complete the gap between Idaho Springs and Georgetown, but the work went more and more slowly. I realized that this was taking longer than it should have. It should be fun, but it had become a job. Here, the town has been made to appear larger by incorporation of mirrors where the backdrop would be. This area was significantly reworked after relocation from Little, Colorado. One of the most fascinating parts of the display to me were the molds and castings that Mr. Brunk used to create models and model components. He created and cast vehicles and equipment which is evident all along the line, as well as architectural details. These were cast in resin or clear epoxy using silicone molds. Using this simple technology allowed economy in modeling, as duplicate parts could be cast in numbers without tedious repetition. Now the train enters the famous Georgetown Loop. Here, grades can push 4% as they did on the Colorado and Southern. The little narrow gauge lokes work hard to pull curves at these kinds of grades. I am often asked where I got the plans to correctly scale my model of the bridge. I rather modestly assume this means most viewers think it looked accurate compared to the prototype. The truth is, no prototype plans were used. I simply worked it out proportionally as an artist might make a sketch, rather than a draftsman would do a plan. Paul, the docent operating the train, stops it on the high bridge so I can get a photo from a very famous vantage point. Lastly, the tracks pull into Silver Plume, a full 40 inches higher than Golden at the beginning of our journey. Beyond Silver Plume is the Wye, where trains are turned for their return trip downgrade to Golden. So what'd you think of the Union Central and Northern? It's a beautiful railroad. It's obvious that the person who built it was a real artist. And I love seeing artistry in model railroading. You know, if what you've seen interests you, I would strongly recommend you try and get a copy of his books, Up the Clear Creek on the Narrow Gauge and More Up Clear Creek on the Narrow Gauge. These books are not how-to books, but they are filled with wisdom and philosophy. And I find often if I'm having modeler's block with my layout, I can go to these books and get inspired to get moving again. Until the next video, this is Scott Forbes saying, happy modeling.